Hello everyone, how are you? This is Faith at Faith and Books, and it's early Saturday morning. My hair is a mess, and I forgot my stand, so I'm holding this in my hand. But I just thought I would do a quick wrap up of February. So in February, I already talked about Horatio Hornblower, and I already talked about The Little Minister, which was a buddy read with Janelle at Too Fond of Books. And what was the other thing that I read in February that I already talked about? Oh, The Long Winter. Yeah, by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And then let's see, what else was I planning to read? Oh yeah, so I DNF'd The Heir of Radcliffe by Charlotte Mary Young, which is a Victorian novel, for the second time. I just can't get through that book. I don't like her writing style. That's what it is. She does a lot of, is the word exposition, through dialogue, but the dialogue's really stilted, and I can't distinguish the characters well enough. I get confused. She introduced a lot of characters all at once, and everybody's very officious in worrying about the heir of Redcliffe, because he's got a bad temper, and they're all worried about this flaw, but they themselves have flaws that are, I think, more annoying. So, and maybe that gets developed later, but it was really slow, and I just found myself not caring. So I know she gets compared with Louisa May Alcott, who also is kind of moralistic. You know, she's being didactic about how you should live, you know, a more virtuous way of living. But to me, she really distinguishes the characters much better. She does dialogue better. It's just livelier. So she just has a better hand when it comes to that type of literature, that domestic kind of moralistic literature. But Charlotte Mary Young, some people love her. I had a friend who said she read her books like potato chips, like she just really just scarfed them up. And, you know, she was very, very popular at the time. So, and she's sort of being rediscovered. But I just didn't, I had so many other things going on. I just couldn't force myself to read something that I was just finding drudgery. So I DNF'd it, and I'm sorry about it because I would like to like her. But, and maybe I should try another book by her. This one just doesn't click with me. So then I finished Evelina, by Frances Burney. This was the group read for Feb Regency, and I quite enjoyed it. Now, I mostly listened to it on audio, and it was a very good recording. It may have been slightly abridged. I'm not sure. Whenever I looked to catch up, because I sort of read along or keep pace with the audio in the actual physical book, I didn't notice it. I didn't notice that it was abridged. But I heard a lot of other people complaining that they found the book tedious, and I think I didn't. Though once I heard that criticism, I could see why, because it's a lot of the same situation happening over and over again. I think it's to the credit of the actress who was playing Evelina reading her letters. This is an epistolatory novel. It influenced Jane Austen. It's about a young girl. She's 17, and she's been raised very protectively and lovingly by a guardian, Reverend Arthur Villars. And she's got this sort of mysterious birth story. And she's just going out into the world. And the world, I mean, a lot of times when I was listening to it, or I would occasionally pick it up and read it, and I finished it by reading it. So I read the last few letters, you know, physically instead of listening. You know, hell is other people. She just was always in these situations where she was stuck with people and she didn't have any power, and they wanted to do terrible things. And even the ones that were considered okay, you know, like by society's standards, they still like either were very ineffectual at protecting her, or they just let it happen. Like they just didn't pay attention to her. Anyway, she's very beautiful. And so a lot of, you know, not very nice men are attracted to her and trying to flirt with her and seduce her. And it really paints a picture of how much harassment women got, like young women could get. Like anytime she would go out and this happened over and over again, she would somehow inadvertently get separated. They'd be out at some sort of thing, some sort of outdoor event, and the men would be drinking a lot, and she would get separated, and then she would get really harassed. I mean, several times. It's quite frightening. And some of the people that are considered acceptable in society go over the line into, I think, criminal behavior to harass or to just play practical jokes, that kind of thing. So the world is full of really, not very kind, moral, stuck-up people, and very crass. And she has to deal with all that. And she has a natural sense. I mean, she's been raised by a very kind man, a very loving, intelligent man. So she has high standards, and she wants to do right, and she wants to be virtuous, and she has to deal with all this. And she doesn't know any. It's because she's been so protected and she's so young. She's very naive, and she often makes the situation worse. Like she'll tell a little white lie about something just to get out of something, or whatever. She'll give in a little bit to whatever they're doing and then realize that was a mistake. She shouldn't have done that at all. So she's always in these little perilous situations, and in the meantime she's met the love of her life, and she doesn't even realize it. She just knows she really, really admires him, and all sorts of complications happen, and in the end it's a broad, almost farcical comedy sometimes. But in the end, everything works out right, and it's great. And she's a lovely character to follow along with. So I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was really eye-opening. It kind of, whenever I read these Regency books that aren't Jane Austen, I always think of Georgette Hare. I really love Georgette Hare. She wrote Regency romances from maybe the 30s to the 70s, and she sort of invented the genre. And I find hers very intelligent, and they're not just love stories. They're really funny, and they're really clever, and they're really historically accurate. And when I read this, and when I read Belinda, it really made me think this was Georgette Hare's source material. So I enjoyed Evelina maybe more than some other people did who found it tedious. It didn't strike me like that, although there is a lot of repetition, but the actress was lively enough that I didn't even notice. Okay, then the next book I read, and this book astounded me. This was for Sean D. Stands Fast Faded Pages Book Club, Black Narcissus by Rumer Godden. I had trouble getting traction with this book. I just was like reading it when I was falling asleep at night, and I'd get 2 pages in, and then I'd fall asleep, and then I wouldn't even remember the 2 pages the next day. So it was hard to get into, but it was not the fault of the writer. It was just what was going on in my own life. But once I got into it, it's amazing. And so it's the story of these nuns, these Anglican nuns, who go to start a convent in the Himalayan mountains, or like the foothills or something. And the area has a backstory, which is foreboding. And then the whole thing is really, really foreboding, as you can tell from the cover. And bad things happen. And but it's much more than just that type of story. It's really, as Sean said, it's talking about the clash of cultures. And I mean, it's a really deep book. And the funny thing was, while I was reading this, I started reading The Cloud of Unknowing for Lent. And I think Rumer Godden had read The Cloud of Unknowing, because The Cloud of Unknowing is all about contemplative prayer and how to really connect to God in your prayer life. And it really talks about detachment from even your own thoughts, because your thoughts are always going to sort of lead you off down a track, and you're going to lose your focus or your concentration on your meditation on God's love. And so that's what happens. These nuns are so busy. They're so devoted to what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, which is open a school and a hospital. And there's hardly any God in their life. I mean, every once in a while it gets mentioned, but it's not, it really is absent. So they're just so busy. And then you can kind of compare them to this, I guess he was a Hindu character. What was his name? Sunyasa or something, Yasis, who has completely abandoned everything, and he just sits and gazes at the mountain. He's become one with the mountain, and he doesn't care about the weather. He doesn't talk to anyone. He's just there meditating on the mountain. And the native people around him, you know, they bring him food, and when the rains come, they rig up a shelter for him and that sort of thing. He does nothing for anybody. It's all about his own oneness with the mountain, or whatever it is that he's one with. And whereas the nuns are trying to do everything for everybody, except there's such a culture clash. They look down on the native people as sort of more primitive and, you know, more childlike. They don't understand their, and they probably are, because they're, you know, like peasants who are ignorant. But they don't understand the culture at all. And although sometimes they appreciate it, sometimes they can appreciate it, but and they're you know, they're busy, they're kind of officious in trying to do things for these people, whether they like it or not, whether the people want it or not. And they don't have that focus on God that they need to have. And so what happens is they just start to unravel. And God has it that the actual nature of the place has this sort of casts a spell, because it's so gorgeous, and there's this wind, the weather is so dramatic, everything's so different. They're at a higher altitude that they just sort of lose their center, and each nun responds in a different way. And the Mother Superior, her thing is that she's really, I think her sin was really pride, because, well, I don't want to spoil the story, but that was her issue, and that's what was keeping her. So she has this cathartic experience after this horrible thing happens, and she actually does kind of break through, where she's more detached and a little bit more like the Hindu guy who's so detached. Although, you know, in Christianity, it's not about losing yourself so that, you know, you don't suffer or whatever. It's about losing yourself in serving others, right? Because in Christianity, God is love. And so that's how you become selfless, by serving others, and in that way you actually gain happiness, because you're closest to God, who is love. So it's a very different approach, although there are similarities. Anyway, I thought it was brilliant. I thought this 5-star. There's so much to this. I would love to read it in a church group or something and just analyze what it's saying about our vocations and how we achieve that a higher spiritual plane, and, you know, what Hinduism has to bring to the story and what Christianity has to bring to the story. And just, it was really a really interesting read. I really liked it. Okay, and then the last one I'm going to talk about is, you know, when I did my March TBR, I forgot about middle grade March. And I'm trying to read my shelf and read all this middle grade stuff that I have from my homeschooling days. And so I managed to read this, Susan Cooper's Oversea Under Stone, The Dark is Rising sequence. And the next one, which I hope to read at the end of March, is The Dark is Rising, which actually won a Newbery Honor book. And then she wrote another one called Greenwich. And then the next one, The Gray King, actually was a Newbery Medal winner. And then the last book is Silver on the Tree. So this is a whole trilogy, 5 books. I never hear anyone talk about it, even though it won these awards. It was really good. It was really good. It was kind of a classic British children's story, except there weren't 4 children. There were only 3. There were these 3 kids, Simon, Jane, and Barnabas. Barnabas is a King Arthur fan. This came out in 1965. They're on vacation with their parents in Cornwall, and with their great uncle Mary, who's an old friend. He's not really their uncle. He's an old friend of the family. He's a professor. And there's always been something strange about him. Anyway, they get caught up in this hunt for the Grail. And it was quite exciting. They're often in peril, and as a mother, I was like, oh my gosh, they're doing that. I mean, it was just really, really unnerving. Very well told, and I found it quite enjoyable. So I'm looking forward to reading the next one. I don't think I'll have time to read it until the end of March. So, all right, well, 15 minutes or almost 16, so that's long enough. I won't go into anything that I'm actually doing now in March. All right, tomorrow is our Fabrigency party. We had to postpone it. It's just a family get-together from last week, so hopefully it'll come off. Who knows? Who knows what it'll be. I might try to do some video. I don't know if everybody in my family is comfortable with me taking videos of them and putting them up on YouTube. So I don't know. Somehow I'll report on it. But yeah, so that's the thing coming up tomorrow. I got to go clean my house. Okay, I hope you're doing well, and happy reading. Bye.